November 2025. The Caribbean Sea has become a theater of potential conflict. The most powerful aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Gerald R, leads a massive American naval force through waters just miles from Venezuelan shores. On the other side, Venezuela responds with its largest military mobilization in years. President Nicolás Maduro calls it a defense of sovereignty. The United States calls it a counter-narcotics operation. Two leaders, two nations, one volatile flashpoint that could reshape the Western Hemisphere. This is the story of how we arrived at the brink of a war. August 2025. Under the name Operation Southern Spear, the United States begins the largest Caribbean military deployment in decades. More than 15,000 troops. The USS Gerald R carrier strike group. Destroyers. Surveillance aircraft. Coast Guard cutters. The stated mission: combat drug trafficking and transnational crime. The Trump administration frames it as protecting American interests and supporting regional allies against what they call narco-terrorism. Since August, U.S. forces have conducted at least 20 strikes on vessels allegedly involved in drug trafficking. Some destroyed, others captured. The operations are surgical, swift, and sending a clear message. But in Caracas, President Maduro sees something else entirely. Not a drug war, but the prelude to regime change. Not protection, but provocation. He accuses Washington of fabricating what he calls a new eternal war and orders Venezuela's military to prepare for the worst. Venezuela responds with its own show of force. Massive troop mobilizations. Military exercises along the coast. Anti-aircraft systems brought to readiness. The message from Caracas is equally clear: we will not back down. To understand this moment, we must go back. Venezuela sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves. For decades, it was Latin America's wealthiest nation and a key U.S. oil supplier. But the relationship was always complicated. In 1999, Hugo Chavez came to power promising a socialist revolution. He nationalized the oil industry, forged alliances with Cuba, Iran, and Russia, and became one of America's most vocal critics. Venezuelan oil money funded anti-American governments across Latin America. But the Bolivarian Revolution would collapse under its own weight. Corruption, mismanagement, and falling oil prices devastated Venezuela's economy. By 2015, the country was in freefall. When Chavez died in 2013, his successor Nicolás Maduro inherited a nation in crisis. Hyperinflation reached 1,000,000%. GDP collapsed by 3/4. 7 million Venezuelans fled the country. What was once South America's richest nation became one of its poorest. July 28, 2024. Venezuelans went to the polls in what many hoped would be a turning point. The opposition, united behind candidate Edmundo González, appeared poised for victory. Exit polls suggested a landslide against Maduro. But official results told a different story. The government's electoral council declared Maduro the winner with 51% of the vote. They refused to release detailed precinct-level data that would verify the count. The opposition cried fraud, releasing their own tally sheets showing González won by a wide margin. The United States, the European Union, and several Latin American nations refused to recognize Maduro's victory. But Maduro remained in power, backed by the military and key international allies. Today, Venezuela has two men claiming to be its legitimate president: Nicolás Maduro, who controls the government and military, and Edmundo González, recognized by the United States and dozens of other nations as the rightful winner. But this conflict is about more than democracy and human rights. Venezuela possesses resources that make it impossible to ignore. 300 billion barrels of oil, the world's largest reserves. Even in decline, Venezuelan oil matters to global energy markets. And to the United States, sitting on its doorstep. Then there's the geopolitical chess game. Russia and China have invested billions in Venezuela. Russian military advisors train Venezuelan forces. Chinese loans keep the regime afloat. For Moscow and Beijing, Venezuela is a foothold in America's backyard. And there's the humanitarian spillover. 7 million Venezuelan refugees have fled to neighboring countries, creating the second-largest displacement crisis in the world. Colombia, Brazil, Peru, and Chile struggle to absorb the exodus. Some refugees continue north, reaching the U.S. southern border. Finally, there's the drug trade. U.S. officials estimate that significant cocaine trafficking flows through Venezuelan territory, with some government officials allegedly complicit. Washington sees Venezuela not just as a rogue regime, but as a narco-state threatening regional stability. Operation Southern Spear represents the most significant U.S. military presence in the Caribbean since the Cold War. But what exactly is Washington trying to achieve? Publicly, the mission is clear: disrupt drug trafficking networks, deny criminal organizations safe haven, and support regional partners. The 20-plus strikes on suspected trafficking vessels demonstrate this is not merely a show of force. But military analysts point to a broader strategy. The deployment establishes a maritime cordon around Venezuela. It demonstrates capability and resolve. It sends a message not just to Caracas, but to Moscow and Beijing. The Western Hemisphere remains within America's sphere of influence. Some observers see preparation for potential military action, a blockade, or support for internal regime change. Others see it as maximum pressure, using the threat of force to compel negotiations or collapse. The Trump administration has layered military pressure with economic warfare. New sanctions target Venezuelan oil exports, government officials, and financial networks. The goal: make it impossible for Maduro to sustain power. In Caracas, President Maduro frames the American deployment as an existential threat. His response has been defiant mobilization. Venezuelan forces have conducted their largest exercises in years. Reserves have been called up. Coastal defense systems activated. Anti-aircraft batteries positioned. The message: any American military action will come at a cost. Maduro has also strengthened ties with his most important allies. Russia has increased military advisors in Venezuela. China continues financial support. Both nations have warships conducting exercises with Venezuelan naval forces. Regionally, Maduro counts on support from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. These nations view the U.S. deployment as imperialism and pledge solidarity with Venezuela. Domestically, Maduro has rallied his base around nationalist rhetoric. The American threat, he argues, proves the opposition are foreign puppets. For many Venezuelans exhausted by crisis, the question becomes: which threat is greater, Maduro's government or American intervention? Lost in the geopolitical chess game are the Venezuelan people themselves. While military forces posture, ordinary citizens face a daily struggle for survival. The economy continues its collapse. The average Venezuelan earns less than $5 per month. Medicine is scarce. Electricity is unreliable. Clean water isn't guaranteed. Each month, thousands more flee. Families are separated. Professionals become migrants. A generation of Venezuelans is growing up in exile. Neighboring nations bear the burden. Colombia hosts over 2 million Venezuelan refugees. The strain on services, jobs, and social cohesion creates tensions. The refugee crisis has become a regional crisis. And now, with military forces mobilizing on both sides, Venezuelans face a new fear: that their country could become a battlefield. That the crisis of economic collapse could become a crisis of war. So where does this confrontation lead? Multiple scenarios emerge, each with profound consequences. Scenario 1: military intervention. The United States could launch strikes targeting Venezuelan military capabilities, or even a broader invasion to remove Maduro. It would be swift, overwhelming, and likely successful militarily. But then what? Occupying Venezuela, a nation of 30 million people with difficult terrain and armed loyalist militias, could become a quagmire. The humanitarian costs would be immense. Regional backlash could destabilize Latin America. Scenario 2: negotiated transition. International pressure, internal collapse, or backroom deals could lead to Maduro's exit, perhaps through guaranteed amnesty, exile, or power-sharing arrangements. But negotiations have failed repeatedly. Maduro has shown no willingness to relinquish power. The opposition refuses to legitimize his rule. Trust is non-existent. Scenario 3. Strategic containment. The U.S. maintains military pressure without direct intervention. A de facto blockade. Maximum sanctions. Waiting for internal collapse or military defection. This slow strangulation could work, but at tremendous human cost. Venezuelans would suffer while the regime clings to power. The refugee crisis would intensify. The timetable could stretch years. Scenario 4. Extended stalemate. Neither side backs down, but neither escalates to full conflict. Military forces remain deployed. The crisis becomes normalized. Venezuela remains divided, sanctioned, and isolated. The implications extend far beyond Venezuela's borders. This standoff is a test case for American power in the 21st century. Can the United States compel regime change through pressure alone? Or have authoritarian regimes learned to resist? China, Russia, and Iran are watching carefully. So, is every nation that values sovereignty over American preferences? For Latin America, the question is whether the region can solve its own problems or whether Washington still dictates outcomes. Military intervention could unite Latin Americans against perceived imperialism, but continued Venezuelan collapse destabilizes the entire region. For global energy markets, Venezuela's massive reserves remain locked away. Regime change could release hundreds of billions of barrels to world markets. Or protracted conflict could remove Venezuelan oil entirely. And for Venezuelans themselves, the stakes are their future. Democracy or dictatorship. Prosperity or poverty. Peace or war. Home or exile. Today, in the Caribbean, two nations stand at a crossroads. The United States projects power, seeking to reshape Venezuela's future. Venezuela mobilizes in defiance, fighting to maintain its sovereignty. History will judge whether Operation Southern Spear was justified intervention or dangerous overreach. Whether Maduro's resistance was heroic defiance or desperate authoritarianism. But history is being written now. In the waters of the Caribbean. In the streets of Caracas. In the decisions being made in Washington. The standoff continues. The stakes couldn't be higher. And the world is watching.